Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Now, if you have ever wanted to grow your own grapevines but did not want to spend a small fortune at the nursery, you are going to love this one. In this video, I am going to show you exactly how to grow free grapevines from store-bought grapes. That is right. Those grapes sitting in your refrigerator right now could become beautiful, productive vines in your backyard. I am going to walk you through the entire process from start to finish, including harvesting the seeds, getting them ready to sprout, and growing them into healthy young vines. Plus, stick around to the end, because I have got a bonus tip that will help you get your new vines off to the fastest possible start. Trust me, you do not want to miss it. Let us get into it. So here is the thing about grapes. They are one of the most rewarding plants you can grow in your home garden. There is nothing quite like walking out to your backyard and picking clusters of fresh, sun-warmed grapes right off your own vine. And the good news is that starting them from seed is actually a lot easier than most people think. Once you understand a few key concepts and follow the right steps, you will have little grape seedlings popping up before you know it. So let me start by sharing the number one reason most people fail at this. Now, before we get into the step-by-step process, I need to give you a quick tip that is going to save you a whole lot of frustration. This is the thing that trips up most people who try to grow grapes from store-bought fruit, and if you skip this part, you are probably going to end up with zero germination. So pay attention here. The quick tip is this. You need to make sure your grapes actually have seeds in them. I know that sounds obvious, but here's the problem. The vast majority of grapes you find in grocery stores these days are seedless varieties. They have been bred specifically to not produce viable seeds, which is great for eating, but terrible for propagation. So if you grab a bag of those nice plump green or red seedless grapes, you are not going to find anything inside to plant. You need to specifically look for seeded grape varieties. Now, where do you find seeded grapes? Well, they are getting harder to come by, but they are still out there. Check your local farmers markets first. Because small growers often sell traditional seeded varieties, you can also look at international grocery stores or specialty markets. Concord grapes, muscadine grapes, and many wine grape varieties are typically seeded. Sometimes you will find seeded black grapes or seeded red grapes at regular grocery stores, especially during peak grape season in late summer and early fall. Just read the label carefully. If it does not say seedless, give one a squeeze and check inside before you buy a whole bag. Here is another important thing to know. If your grapes were imported from another country, they may have been irradiated to meet United States quarantine regulations. This is a low level of radiation that kills off any pests or pathogens, but it can also damage the seeds and make them unable to germinate. So whenever possible, try to source grapes that were grown in the United States. Check that little sticker or the packaging to see where they came from. Domestically grown grapes are going to give you the best chance of success. All right, now that you know what to look for, let us talk about selecting the best grapes for seed harvesting. Not all grapes are created equal when it comes to growing from seed, and a little bit of careful selection up front is going to make a big difference in your results. First, you want to choose grapes that are fully ripe. I mean really, truly ripe. You want grapes that are deeply colored, slightly soft to the touch, and incredibly sweet. The reason for this is that grape seeds need to be fully mature inside the fruit before they are capable of germinating. If you harvest seeds from underripe grapes, those seeds may not have finished developing, and they simply will not sprout no matter what you do. So go for the ripest grapes you can find. In fact, grapes that are almost overripe are often ideal for seed harvesting. Now, I personally like to let my grapes sit in the refrigerator for a week or two before I harvest the seeds. This gives them a little extra time to fully mature, and it also starts to soften the fruit, which makes seed extraction a lot easier. I have had grapes get a little wrinkly in the back of the fridge, kind of like what happens when you forget about them after vacation, and those actually work perfectly well for this purpose. The fruit might not be pleasant to eat anymore, but those seeds inside are primed and ready to go. When selecting your grape variety, keep in mind that whatever you grow from seed is going to be a bit of a mystery. Grapes, like apples and many other fruits, do not grow true from seed. That means the vine you grow might produce fruit that tastes different from the grape you started with. It could be better, it could be worse, or it could be somewhere in between. This is because most grapes are cross-pollinated by bees, so the seeds contain genetic material from two different parent plants. I will talk more about this later, but just know going in that you are embarking on a little gardening adventure here. You might end up with something truly special. All right, once you have got your ripe seeded grapes, it is time to harvest those seeds. This is actually a pretty simple process, but I am going to show you the method that gives you the cleanest seeds with the least amount of effort. Here is what you are going to need. You will need your seeded grapes, obviously. You will need a blender or food processor. You will need a fine mesh strainer or just a regular kitchen strainer. You will need a bowl and access to running water. And you will need some paper towels for drying your seeds afterward. That is it. Nice and simple. Now here is how the process works. Take your grapes and toss them into the blender. You do not need a huge amount to get plenty of seeds. Even half a cup of grapes is going to give you dozens of seeds to work with. Add enough water to the blender so that the grapes are just barely covered. We are not making a smoothie to drink here. We just want enough liquid to let everything move around freely. Give it a quick blend on low speed for about 10 to 15 seconds. You are not trying to pulverize everything into oblivion. You just want to break up the grape flesh and release the seeds. The beauty of this method is that grape seeds are small and hard, so the blender blades are not going to damage them. They will sink right to the bottom while all the pulp and skin gets chopped up and suspended in the water. Now here is the clever part. Let the mixture sit for a minute or two. The viable, healthy seeds are heavier than the pulp, so they are going to sink down to the bottom of the blender pitcher. Any seeds that float are likely hollow or underdeveloped, and those are the ones you do not want anyway. So you are automatically sorting the good seeds from the bad just by letting gravity do its work. Carefully pour off the liquid and pulp from the top, being careful not to disturb those seeds at the bottom. Then add fresh water, give it a gentle swirl, and let it settle again. Pour off the cloudy water. Repeat this process 3 or 4 times until the water runs mostly clear and you are left with clean seeds sitting at the bottom. Pour those seeds into your fine mesh strainer and give them a final rinse under cool running water. Pick out any remaining bits of pulp or skin. You want your seeds to be as clean as possible because any leftover fruit material can cause mold problems later on. Once they are clean, spread them out on a paper towel and let them dry for a day or 2. Do not put them in direct sunlight or try to speed up the drying with heat. Just let them air dry at room temperature. At this point, you should have a nice little collection of grape seeds ready for the next step. And here is where a lot of people make their second big mistake. They try to plant the seeds right away. But grape seeds are not going to germinate if you just stick them in soil. They need to go through a process called stratification first, and that is exactly what we are going to cover next. So what exactly is stratification, and why do grape seeds need it? Well, let me explain. Grapevines are perennial plants that naturally grow in climates with distinct seasons. In the wild, grapes produce fruit in late summer and fall. The fruit eventually drops to the ground, the flesh rots away, and the seeds are left sitting in the soil over winter. Those seeds experience months of cold, wet conditions before spring arrives and triggers germination. This is nature's way of making sure the seeds do not sprout at the wrong time. If a grape seed germinated in October, the tender little seedling would be killed by the first hard frost. So the seeds have a built-in dormancy that requires a period of cold before they will wake up and grow. When we grow grapes from seed at home, we need to simulate this winter period artificially. That is what stratification means. We are essentially tricking the seeds into thinking they have been through winter, so they will be ready to germinate when we plant them. Here is how to do it. Take your clean, dry grape seeds and place them on a damp paper towel. When I say damp, I mean just barely moist. You should not be able to squeeze water out of the paper towel. It should feel like a wrung-out sponge. Too much moisture will cause your seeds to rot, and too little will not provide the conditions they need. Fold the damp paper towel over the seeds so they are sandwiched in the middle. Then slide the whole thing into a plastic zip-top bag. Press out most of the air and seal it up. Label the bag with the date so you can keep track of how long they have been stratifying. Now put that bag in your refrigerator. Not the freezer, the refrigerator. You want temperatures right around 35 to 40 degrees Fahrenheit. The vegetable crisper drawer is usually perfect for this. Your grape seeds are going to need to stay in there for a minimum of 2 to 3 months. I know that sounds like a long time, but this step is absolutely essential. If you try to shortcut the stratification period, your germination rates are going to be very poor. I like to start my stratification in late December or early January. That way the seeds are ready to plant in March or April, which lines up nicely with spring planting season. Check on your seeds every couple of weeks. Open the bag, make sure the paper towel is still damp, and look for any signs of mold. If you see any fuzzy growth, remove those affected seeds immediately and replace the paper towel with a fresh one. After about 2 to 3 months in the refrigerator, your grape seeds should be fully stratified and ready to germinate. Some people get lucky and actually see little white root tips starting to emerge while the seeds are still in the fridge. If that happens to you, congratulations, your seeds are definitely viable and ready to plant right away. But even if you do not see any roots yet, do not worry. As long as the seeds have been cold stratified for the right amount of time, they should germinate once you give them the right conditions. Now let us talk about actually germinating those seeds and getting them to sprout. You have a couple of options here, and I am going to share my preferred method that gives me the most consistent results. The first option is to plant the stratified seeds directly into soil. You can use a standard seed starting mix or a soilless potting mix. Fill some small pots or cell trays with your mix. Plant the seeds about 1/2 inch deep. Water them gently and place them somewhere warm. Grape seeds germinate best when soil temperatures are between 70 and 75 degrees Fahrenheit. A heat mat designed for seed starting can be really helpful here, especially if you are starting your seeds in early spring when indoor temperatures might still be on the cool side. My preferred method, though, is to continue using the paper towel technique to actually germinate the seeds before planting them. Here is why I like this approach. Grapeseed germination can be a bit unpredictable. Some seeds might sprout in 2 weeks, while others take 4 or 5 weeks. When you germinate on paper towels, you can see exactly which seeds have sprouted and plant only the viable ones. You are not wasting soil and pot space on seeds that might never come up. Plus, you can monitor the process more closely and catch any problems early. To germinate on paper towels, take your stratified seeds out of the refrigerator and set them up in a fresh, damp paper towel inside a new zip-top bag, just like before. But instead of putting them back in the cold fridge, this time you are going to put them somewhere warm and dark. I like to use the top of my refrigerator because the motor generates a little bit of warmth. A shelf in a closet or pantry works well too. You are looking for consistent temperatures in that 70 to 75 degree range. Avoid spots that get direct sunlight or have big temperature swings. Check your seeds every few days. You are looking for little white root tips to emerge from the pointed end of the seed. This is called the radicle, and it is the very first root that the seedling sends out. Once you see that little white tail, you know the seed is alive and ready to be planted. Some seeds will germinate in as little as 2 weeks, while others might take up to 6 weeks. Be patient and keep checking. Now I want to mention something important here. Even under ideal conditions, grapeseed germination rates are not as high as something like tomatoes or peppers. You might get 50 to 70% germination on a good batch, and sometimes lower. This is totally normal for grapes. It is just how they are. That is why I always recommend starting with more seeds than you think you need. If you want 10 vines, start with at least 25 to 30 seeds to make sure you end up with enough healthy seedlings. By the way, if you are finding this helpful so far, take a second to hit that subscribe button so you do not miss future videos. All right, let us keep going. Once your seeds have sprouted and you can see those little white root tips, it is time to get them into soil. Do not wait too long at this stage. Once the radicle emerges, you want to plant within a day or two because those delicate roots can dry out quickly if left exposed. Here is what you need for transplanting. Get some small pots, cell trays, or even plastic cups with drainage holes poked in the bottom. Fill them with a good quality seed starting mix, or a light, well-draining potting mix. I like to use something that has a mix of peat moss, perlite, and vermiculite. You want it to hold moisture, but also drain well because grape seedlings are susceptible to damping off if they sit in soggy soil. Moisten your potting mix before planting. It should be damp throughout but not dripping wet. Use your finger or a pencil to make a small hole, about 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch deep. Very carefully pick up your sprouted seed, trying not to touch or damage that fragile little root. Place the seed in the hole with the root tip pointing down. Gently cover with soil and press down lightly. Do not pack the soil too firmly. The little seedling needs to be able to push its way up to the surface. If you are planting seeds that have not visibly sprouted yet, but have been fully stratified, plant them the same way. Just know that it might take a few weeks before you see anything emerge above the soil line. Mark your pots so you know what is in them and when you planted. After planting, water gently with a spray bottle or a watering can with a very fine rose. You do not want to blast the soil and disturb those tiny seeds. Place your pots in a warm location with bright indirect light. A south-facing window works well, or you can use grow lights if you have them. Keep the soil consistently moist, but never waterlogged. I like to cover my seed trays with a clear plastic dome or plastic wrap to hold in humidity during the germination phase. Just make sure to remove the cover once you see green sprouts emerging. In about 1 to 3 weeks, you should start to see your grape seedlings poking up through the soil. They will have 2 small rounded leaves called cotyledons. These are the seed leaves, and they look quite different from the true grape leaves that will come later. At this stage, your little seedlings are very delicate. Keep them in bright light for at least 12 to 14 hours a day to prevent them from getting leggy and weak. If they start stretching toward the light and getting tall and spindly, they need more light. Now that you have got little grape seedlings growing, let us talk about how to care for them and grow them into strong, healthy vines that you can eventually plant outside in your garden. For the first few weeks, keep your seedlings in their small pots and focus on providing consistent conditions. They want bright light, temperatures between 65 and 75 degrees Fahrenheit, and evenly moist soil. Do not let them dry out completely, but also do not keep them soaking wet. Water when the top 1/4 inch of soil feels dry to the touch. Once your seedlings have developed their first set of true leaves, which are the classic-looking grape leaves with that distinctive shape, you can start feeding them with a very diluted liquid fertilizer. I use a balanced fertilizer mixed at 1/4 strength. Too much fertilizer at this stage can burn those tender roots, so less is more. Feed once a week or every other week. When your seedlings have 3 or 4 sets of true leaves and are starting to outgrow their small pots, it is time to transplant them into larger containers. Move them into 4-inch pots filled with a good quality potting mix. Be gentle when transplanting. Grape seedlings have delicate root systems, and you want to disturb them as little as possible. Water thoroughly after transplanting and keep them out of direct hot sunlight for a few days while they recover from the move. As your vines grow, they are going to want something to climb. Grapes are natural climbers, and even young seedlings will start sending out tendrils looking for something to grab onto. Stick a small bamboo stake or wooden dowel in the pot and gently tie the main stem to it with soft string or plant clips. This keeps the vine growing upright and prevents it from flopping over or tangling with neighboring plants. Throughout the spring and summer, continue to water and feed your young vines regularly. You can move them outside once nighttime temperatures are consistently above 50 degrees Fahrenheit and there is no more danger of frost. Start by placing them in a shaded spot for a few days, then gradually move them into more sun over the course of a week or two. This hardening off process helps them adjust to outdoor conditions without getting shocked or sunburned. By the end of the first growing season, your seedlings should be healthy young vines with several feet of growth. At this point, you have a decision to make. You can either plant them in their permanent location in your garden or overwinter them in pots and plant them out the following spring. In Zone 7 and warmer, fall planting is usually fine. In colder zones, I recommend keeping them in pots over winter in a protected location, like an unheated garage or cold frame, then planting in spring after the last frost. Now let us talk about some common problems you might run into and how to solve them, because even when you do everything right, things can sometimes go sideways. The first problem a lot of people encounter is zero germination. You did the stratification, you set up your seeds in warm conditions, and nothing happened. If this happens to you, there are a few possible causes. The most likely culprit is that your grapes were seedless to begin with, or the seeds were not fully mature, or the grapes were irradiated. Always double-check that you are starting with fully seeded grapes from domestic sources. Another possibility is that your stratification period was too short. If you only did 4 or 5 weeks in the fridge, try again with fresh seeds and give them a full 3 months of cold treatment. The second common problem is mold growth during stratification or germination. If you see fuzzy white or green mold growing on your paper towels or seeds, it usually means things are too wet. Remove any moldy seeds immediately, replace the paper towel with a fresh damp one, and make sure you are not over-wetting. The paper towel should be moist, not soaked. A tiny splash of hydrogen peroxide in your rinse water when cleaning the seeds can also help prevent mold issues. Third is damping off, which is when your seedlings suddenly collapse and die at the soil line. This is caused by fungal pathogens that thrive in wet, cool conditions. To prevent damping off, make sure your pots have good drainage. Do not overwater. Provide good air circulation, and avoid keeping things too cold. If you lose seedlings to damping off, start fresh with sterile potting mix and clean containers. Fourth, you might notice your seedlings getting tall and spindly with pale leaves. This is almost always a light problem. They need more light, plain and simple. Move them to a brighter window, add supplemental grow lights, or extend the number of hours they are receiving light each day. Grape seedlings need lots of bright light to grow strong and stocky. Fifth is slow growth or yellowing leaves on otherwise healthy-looking seedlings. This usually indicates a nutrient deficiency. Make sure you are feeding with a balanced fertilizer once your seedlings have their true leaves. Yellowing between the leaf veins can indicate iron deficiency, which sometimes happens when soil pH is too high. Using an acidic potting mix or adding a little sulfur can help. The good news is that grape seedlings are actually pretty resilient once they get established. If you follow the steps I have shown you and pay attention to their basic needs, most of these problems are easy to avoid. Now for that bonus tip I promised you at the beginning of the video. This is something that can really help your young grapevines get established faster and grow more vigorously in their first couple of years. The bonus tip is to inoculate your grape seedlings with mycorrhizal fungi when you transplant them. Now I know that sounds like something out of a science textbook, but stay with me here because this is actually really simple and it makes a huge difference. Mycorrhizae, and you pronounce that mycorrhizae, are beneficial fungi that form a symbiotic relationship with plant roots. In nature, almost all plants have these fungal partners living on and around their roots. The fungi extend the reach of the root system by sending out incredibly fine filaments that can access water and nutrients the roots could never reach on their own. In exchange, the plant shares some of its sugars with the fungi. It is a beautiful partnership that has existed for millions of years. Here is how to use it with your grape seedlings. You can buy mycorrhizal inoculant at most garden centers or online. It usually comes as a powder or granular product. When you transplant your seedlings into larger pots or into their permanent location in the garden, just sprinkle a small amount of the inoculant directly onto the roots or into the planting hole. That is it. The fungi will colonize the roots and start helping your plant right away. I started doing this with all my transplants a few years ago, and the difference in growth and vigor is really noticeable. Plants that get mycorrhizal inoculant establish faster, handle drought stress better, and just seem healthier overall. For grapevines specifically, which are going to be in the ground for decades, giving them this beneficial fungal boost right from the start sets them up for long-term success. It is a small thing that makes a big difference, and I highly recommend it. Now, before we wrap up, I want to give you some realistic expectations about growing grapes from seed, because I think it is important to go into this with your eyes open. When you grow grapes from store-bought fruit, you are not going to know exactly what variety you are growing. Grapes, like apples, do not come true from seed. The vine you grow might produce fruit that tastes completely different from the grape you started with. It might be better, it might be worse, or it might be somewhere in between. You are essentially creating a brand new grape variety, which is kind of exciting when you think about it. But if you are hoping to replicate that exact grape you bought at the store, that is probably not going to happen. The other thing to know is that grapevines grown from seed take a long time to produce fruit. You are looking at 3 to 5 years before your vine is mature enough to give you a harvest. That is just the nature of growing grapes from seed versus buying an established vine from a nursery. So here is what I recommend. Absolutely do grow some grapevines from seed. It is a fun project. It is practically free, and you might end up with something really special. But if you want grapes to eat in the next year or two, also consider buying a couple of established vines of known varieties from a good nursery. That way you get the best of both worlds. You get some instant gratification from the nursery vines while your seedlings are growing up. And in a few years you will have even more vines producing fruit. Plus, you will have extra seedlings to give away to friends and family, which is always nice. So that is everything you need to know about growing free grapevines from store-bought grapes. We covered selecting the right grapes, harvesting and cleaning the seeds, stratification, germination, transplanting, and caring for your young vines. If you found this helpful, make sure to subscribe and hit that bell icon so you do not miss future videos. And if you have any questions or if you have done this yourself, drop a comment below and let me know how it went. I always love hearing from you. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Happy gardening.